Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to dissect my reading taste. Recently, Harriet Rosie posted a video that asked some frankly really hard questions about reading taste, and she was kind enough to invite me to answer them, so I'm going to give it a shot. If you know anything about me, then you'll know that I'm a little bit hard to pin down, a little bit hard to define when it comes to the types of books I like, besides just nonfiction. So we'll see if I'm actually able to do this. Let's start at the very beginning with, unfortunately, the hardest question of this entire list. Describe your reading taste in one sentence. This was so hard. It took me a really long time to think up one sentence that encompasses all of the reading that I do. I read a little bit of everything. Again, I am very all over the place. But this is what I came up with. Let me know if you think it's consistent with what you've seen from me here on the channel over the years. But here we go. I enjoy edifying, multi-layered books with attitude. Let's break that down though. I use the word edifying because I like the books I read to teach me something. Like fiction or nonfiction, whether I'm coming out of a book having learned lessons, pieces of wisdom, like from a work of fiction, or just straight up facts from a work of nonfiction. I like to come away from a reading experience feeling like the book has made me better. I like my books to be multi-layered. I like when books can be enjoyed on multiple levels. Like when you go into a book, if you're looking just to have a surface level fun experience, then you can have that. But if you want to dig deeper, that's there for you also. I like characters who have a lot of depth. I like beautiful sentences loaded with nuance. I like books that ask something of you as a reader. And then the with attitude part at the end of the sentence, I don't necessarily mean they always have to be snarky. I mean, I like books with authors who make themselves known. Like, I like when you can feel their presence. You can feel their personality, their expertise, their command of language. Like, you just definitely feel their presence. And then also within the book, I like books that make a statement with their style and that aren't afraid to be exactly what they are, regardless of what that is. I like books that go for it. That's what I mean by with attitude. Next, describe your reading taste within categories. And in her video, Harriet Rosie mentioned that she means how publishers would categorize books. So starting from the very top with the age range, of course, I prefer books directed at adults, adult books. Very rarely I'll pick up a young adult book, but pretty much never middle grade or children's literature. It's just not really my thing. Genre, well, that's pretty easy to guess, especially if you spend any time here on my channel, mainly nonfiction. And I like most of the subgenres within nonfiction. It's probably actually easier for me to mention the subgenres of nonfiction that I don't enjoy because I like pretty much everything else. So I don't enjoy nonfiction books on physics, philosophy, war, or religion. Pretty much everything else, though, I am game, but especially memoirs and books about nature. Bonus points if it's a memoir that includes nature writing. I do still read fiction, though, so when it comes to fiction, I tend to be drawn toward historical fiction, literary fiction, and contemporary, but occasionally I will pick up a mystery or a thriller, a romance, or sometimes, very, very rarely, a work of fantasy. Length of book, ideally 350 pages, or somewhere within the range of 325 to 375. I have found that that's the ideal length of book for me. Very rarely have I read a book that's over 375 pages, definitely books over 400 pages, that truly needed to be that long. I normally, with books that long, want to chop some things out and get them closer to that 350 ideal length. And then books that are under 300 pages, unless they're very limited in scope, I feel like it's hard to get the job done with that few of pages. And I totally agree with what Harriet said in her video about short chapters. Yes, short chapters, give me short chapters, even in nonfiction books. They help pull me through a book so much faster. I'm able to get so much more momentum. I love short chapters. I know there are probably some of you out there who enjoy taking your time with books. I think that's amazing. It's just personally not for me. I am someone who has a TBR with more books on it than the population of a small nation, and I am already in my 30s. I have no time to waste. Next, Harriet has asked me to show off a few books that represent my reading taste. There are so many that I could use as examples, but I pulled 3 off of my middle favorites shelf here behind me, and I will explain why I chose them. First, There's Trust by Hernan Diaz, literally multi-layered, since it's essentially 3 novels in one, and we're peeling back the onion layers, hoping to get to the core, the truth of this power couple that actually made money when the stock market crashed. This is so smart, and it is brilliantly written. There's so much to chew on in here. There's a finance element that had me bringing in my own finance background when I reviewed this one for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I am still so obsessed with this book, even if it is just over 400 pages. But I swear, if someone had given me a red pen during the editing process, I could have gotten it down to 375. Nonfiction next, I went with a gimme. It's Featherhood by Charlie Gilmore. This is a beautiful memoir about the author's time spent raising an orphaned magpie chick. And at the time, he was grappling with his very complex relationship with his father, his relationship with his stepfather, while also preparing to become a father himself. I knew just from the description of this book, the fact that it included a bird, and I am such a bird nerd, that I was going to love this book, and love it I did. I actually reviewed it here on my channel. And then finally, I wanted to throw in an older one and maybe a little bit more of an unexpected one. It's Sweet Bitter by Stephanie Dandler. This is a novel, but it's actually based on the author's life, her own experiences. It's about a young woman who moves to New York City and begins working at a very fancy restaurant that quickly sucks her into its orbit. This book has some great characters. It's got the whole restaurant world, wine world thing going for it. And it is highly intellectual. And that's why a lot of readers have described this as pretentious. I don't even necessarily disagree with that. I would just say that that's precisely what this book should be, because that's what the world it's describing is. That world is extremely highfalutin, extremely wealthy. And that's what I mean by books with attitude. It's so much more concerned with being precisely what it is, being authentic, than whether or not it will appeal to every single reader out there. Fun fact, I've technically read this twice. The second time is when I sat down just to page through this book, maybe brush up on some details of the story ahead of watching the Showtime series, the adaptation of this novel, which then I eventually compared to this novel in a whole video. I will link that for you if you're interested. But I just wanted to brush up on some details that I may have lost over time because it had been, I think, a couple years since I had read it. And then I ended up rereading pretty much the entire thing in one night. This book had the power to draw me in like that. But next, I've been asked to name a book that I didn't enjoy that seemed like it would be my taste. I really thought, sweet summer child that I was going to enjoy the storied life of A.J. Fickery. I mean, it's set in a bookshop. It supposedly has this heartwarming story. I thought there was a really good chance I was going to love it, when really it's just pure emotional manipulation between two covers. And it actually has some pretty disturbing content toward the end that I've never heard anybody else call it out for. I quoted the passage I'm referring to in my Goodreads review. Consult it at your own risk. I just can't get down with books that deliberately play with readers' emotions. I am not the most emotional of creatures. I'm not devoid of emotion. I'm just not the most emotional person out there. So when I see a writer using a tactic to play with a reader's emotions, not only does it not work on me, but it strikes me as very lazy and pretty scummy to do to people who are more emotional. It just feels plain wrong. On to the next one, a book you enjoyed that didn't seem like it would be your taste. That would definitely be The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. This book takes two things that I don't particularly care for, science fiction, space travel, no less, and religion, and then combines them. On paper, I should have hated this, but I loved it. It is intellectually challenging. The characters go on these harrowing physical, mental, emotional journeys, and Mary Doria Russell can seriously write. I am actually so glad I took a chance on something that didn't seem like it would be my kind of thing, because now this is one of my favorites. Since I mentioned my very large TBR earlier on in the video, this next prompt fits in here quite nicely. Show us some books on your TBR that seem like they will be exactly your taste. I'm so nervous to do this because I feel like I'm going to jinx myself. I am so convinced that making a 5-star prediction just curses the book for me. So I guess we'll see if that happens with these three. I'm also not going to cheat. I know there are no rules here, so it can't really be cheating, but I don't want to pick books from authors that I've read before. That's an additional data point. I want to pick books based exclusively on what they are and whether or not I think I'll like them based on what they are. So the first one is The Center by Ayesha Manazir Siddiqui. This is a novel about a Pakistani translator living in London who stumbles into a language school that promises fluency in a foreign language in only 10 days. It's just that it comes at a sinister cost. Nearly everything about this one is just screaming my taste. I like books set at school. I like that collegiate feeling. I also feel like there's always a high probability with books set in or around a school that they're going to be brainy, which helps with the edifying thing I mentioned earlier. Plus, the main character of this book is a translator, a very intellectual profession, so I feel like it could definitely lean in that direction. And this one seems very dark and moody, which is something I love in novels, especially starting in the autumn. A memoir that seems like it could be a winner in my eyes is Shocked by Patricia Volk. From what I've heard about this book, the author discusses her highly fashionable mother and how she was inspired by the avant-garde fashion designer Elsa Schiaparelli. I am not even that into the whole fashion world. I don't know much about it, but that actually draws me toward this memoir more because it seems like I might have something to learn from this. This also seems very complex, highly original, and I found that memoirs that discuss a relationship with one or both parents, not unlike Featherhood, which I mentioned earlier, I find I connect with those. And then you will often find here on my channel that I like to pick up books that relate to my life off of the internet, whether that be a book about a place I'm traveling to or about something I've recently taken an interest in. I like the books I'm reading to reflect where I'm at. And largely because of that, right now, there is a book that is calling my name. It's called Agave Spirits, The Past, Present, and Future of Mezcals by Gary Nabhan and David Suro Pinera. Lately, I've been going to a good number of bars, both during my travels and then also just here in Pittsburgh. I like to go out on occasion and watch a WNBA game when they're on national television, and I can badger the people at the bar to switch the station over to the channel that's playing the WNBA game. But when I go to these bars, I've been finding that I've been developing an appreciation for mezcal, which is a distilled liquor made from agave. The most famous kind of mezcal is tequila, but there are many other kinds, and there's this rich heritage surrounding the making of mezcal that I would love to learn more about. This is a new history that came out just a few months back, and it was published by W.W. Norton, which means it's going to be good. I have yet to read a bad book published by W.W. Norton. I think they're actually allergic to publishing crappy books, which is not an allergy shared by all publishers out there. But not only do I think this one is going to be to my taste, not unlike mezcal, I think it's going to be fantastic. Next, a booktuber you watch who has similar taste to you. This is hard, probably because I'm a known weirdo who does and reads whatever she wants, and I've yet to find anyone else out there who has my exact same insatiable need to learn about everything in this universe and beyond, and who also has a complete flippancy about what anyone else may think about it. Which is probably for the best. I'm a lot. But I have been happy to find at least a few people who overlap with me on a Venn diagram. Jill from The Book Bully and I tend to enjoy similar types of books, specifically when she's on a nonfiction kick around Nonfiction November time, but we do also sometimes read novels that we both like. Gloria Thompson, we tend to have a lot of overlap with historical fiction and nonfiction. And Hannah from Savage Reads. Her wrap-ups nearly always include a book I've either just read and reviewed or one that I want to read in the very near future. So there's always a book of interest for me there. So I definitely recommend all three of those. But if you are looking for more channels, please do check out my Booktuber Shoutouts playlist. Every single year, I make a video recommending booktubers. I've been doing it since my channel got started. And I always try to recommend channels who read at least a little bit similarly to me, just so there's some common ground there. And finally, have you always had this taste in books, or has it changed over time? If you're asking if I've always been a nerd, The answer is yes. I do get questions quite often here on my channel about how I got into reading nonfiction, and the truth is that I've always been into nonfiction. It's actually been more of a challenge for me to get into reading fiction. When I joined BookTube back in 2015, BookTube, the bookish internet in general, being a more fiction-dominated place, that was actually more of my introduction into the fiction world. I started reading more fiction and trying to explore my own taste within fiction. But as time has gone on, I've kind of come full circle and I've gone back to reading more nonfiction than fiction like I did before I started my channel. But being here on BookTube and working as a freelance reviewer have definitely had an impact on my reading taste. I mean, I have always been someone who's been interested in a little bit of everything, but doing those two things has definitely encouraged me to go outside of my comfort zone. Like before I started BookTube, I didn't read romance or memoir. I thought they weren't for me, but then I gave them a try and discovered I loved them. In fact, memoir is probably my favorite subgenre of nonfiction now. I can't believe I didn't read it before starting BookTube. And then I've also discovered a love of bird books and sports books. So the core of who I am and the core of my reading taste, it's the same. It's just a lot broader now. But those were all the questions that Harriet asked. These were a lot of fun, if very challenging to answer. If you want to answer these yourself, either wherever you talk about books or even just down in my comment section, I would love to hear your answers. I have put all of these questions in the description box below for you, along with a link to Harriet's original video, which was a lot of fun to watch. Highly recommend it. All the books I spoke about today and any videos I mentioned will also be linked for you in the description box below for your clicking convenience. And at the bottom of that exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internets. Goodreads, Instagram, the Storygraph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I'm reading and what I'm doing right now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.